Yeah, one of the broader narratives that we're seeing is typically when you think about like a CRM, it's that there's this language like system of record. And what we're seeing is this shift from system of record to system of action, which gets from like a reactive to proactive motion. So how does it not just be a database, but how does it be a database that then informs the next action to take? And that example of like Slack overlay with agents is an example of, hey, like Salesforce is in the background, but Salesforce is that really where the data resides to inform what to do next. And that's what you're going to see with a lot of applications if they want to thrive in this, agent forward market that we're in now.
Welcome to Startups Decoded, the show that gets real about what it takes to build a successful startup. I'm Andy Walsh, 2 times exited founder, strategist, and your host. Each week I talk with top founders, investors, and operators to unpack the plays that drive real traction, not just headlines. If you're building something bold, this is where you'll get the honest insights to scale with clarity and confidence. Let's keep growing together. Hit subscribe and share with your community. It would mean the world to me. Morrison Foster is the legal edge behind the world's boldest innovators. They go by Mofo and are the team behind Startups Decoded. For decades, Mofo has helped startups turn complexity into freedom. Learn more at mofo.com. Hello and welcome back to Startups Decoded. My name is Andy Walsh. If you're a founder, you're looking to grow. That's a given, but the world of growth has changed with the age of AI. But what has created is a new playing field in the sense of how you grow, the tools you use, and then how you actually get to market. And today I'm really fortunate to have Brendan Tolleson, who has 2 hats. He's the CEO of RevPartners, but also the founder of Southbound, which we'll talk about more. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. I'm excited for the conversation.
It's wild how much an industry can shift in a very short space of time. I mean, go to market as a catch-all term is something that is even new in itself, I would say, and how people approach sales and marketing, whatever they're doing can be wrapped up under one term. But what used to be a very manual job and it started in person, email and CRM work has now become really elaborate. And you look at products like Clay, which we'll touch on today, that have really automated that process. That rise of change, how do you even set the scene for what growth and go-to-market looks like today? Like, is there a way you can even define it?
If I could, I'd be a very rich man. It's funny because even when we started RevPartners about 5 years ago, and you think about that, I mean, it was in the heart of COVID, and we were like, hey, we really want to focus on this emerging category called revenue operations. And back 5 years ago, that wasn't even really a category. It was this really nebulous term. People knew sales ops, they knew marketing ops. It was very siloed, and we were saying, hey, there's going to be this new movement. And thankfully, we were at the forefront of that. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more on that. But then to your point, but that was before even AI was a thing. And so now we're just living in this age of disruption where technology is far outpacing human knowledge and human capabilities. And so that naturally creates, what's the right word? Anxiety, not from like, is AI going to take over the world, but more so from the sense of like, how do I use this really powerful platform to actually win? Because it's like this whole paradigm of like, either you can win faster or you can lose harder. And so we're trying to figure out how do we equip and enable these go-to-market leaders to harness the power of what they can do in a beneficial way as opposed to a detrimental way. And I'm excited to unpack that a little bit more.
Operations is interesting. I was talking to a salesperson who works at Tracksuit, which is a brand health platform. It's out of New Zealand, but they've got a big office here now and they've had a lot of funding. And he uses Clay in his sequencing. And it was fascinating, just even his experience in that process from start to finish, where there's whole consultancies exist now to help companies brief Clay and optimize Clay to make it work for them. So like getting systems and process around that makes a lot of sense because the tool can only do so much and that will continue to evolve and become more automated. But understanding that process of how what you're doing in one platform can then translate to others is a whole other thing too. Because if you're testing A/B side by side, different messages, finding the right people, like having success in one platform is great. But then you need to take all of that and package it up and then translate it across to everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think even just take a step back, it's helpful to look at like what has happened that's driving what you're just describing, and from at least from like from a overarching like meta narrative. I mean, the shift that we've seen is growth at all cost to how do we do more with less, meaning, the revenue was king and that's all people cared about. And now you see this balanced perspective, which is, hey, growth is still very important, but profitability, cash is king. And so like, how do we balance that? And that's where you start seeing the whole systems component and what the rise of RevOps, because, oftentimes, we talk about sales I mean, and your audience probably knows this, is like this whole idea, like the art element. And so how do you balance the art with the science? And RevOps really provides a lot of the science, meaning the actual insights and the clarity by connecting these systems and providing the reporting to give that go-to-market leader insights on what's working, what's not. And that's why I think that that's become such a prominent role. And you see the rise of even that, like the CFO even has gotten a lot more power, just because that science or that data is critical to inform, what's working and what's not, to ultimately drive not only revenue, but growth in a responsible fashion.
Responsible in the sense of effectiveness as far as return on what you're putting down. Is it also measured as far as team bandwidth and revenue per person? Like, how broad does that go?
Yeah, I think it depends how mature the organization is, because I think where you're getting in it, like, productivity per rep, for example, which I think is a really good thing to look at. Uh, that's going to get more as you're in that scale mode. But yeah, I mean, it's even if you're a bootstrap company or you are a Series A, like, that cash is just as important. It's just who is really assessing and analyzing that. And so you do want to make sure you're understanding, hey, what are my reps doing? What tools am I investing in? Where am I seeing effective ROI? Those type of, and then if you set the system up, meaning in this example, the CRM, which is that core database for the customer lifecycle, it really helps you understand, what should we be investing in further, or what do we actually need to retire for one reason or another.
The insights around that, I think back to old media days where I came from a while back, and the allocation of budgets to sales teams for spending, and most of it had no quantification whatsoever. It was a lot of entertainment and a lot of late nights, I'll call it. And that was the way the deals got done. It was very much personal relationships, and the age of CRM and email campaigns changed that, and owning first party data became critical. And then the third party platforms came in. If you look at even something like LinkedIn, where you don't have the person's data, but you can still target them and reach people directly, it's different. And I feel like we've almost gone full circle now, where having first party data is actually not only an asset that you have from a commercial point of view with the value of your business, but it's also an advantage against your competitors.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, yeah, it's like what's old is new. And there's a lot of fatigue, to your point on the you flooding your inbox, flooding LinkedIn, things like. I mean, well, personally, I hate phone calls, but I hear it's being effective. Things like direct mail, but also to your point, in person. Uh, I mean, I think it's really what's more a reflection of in my mind is it's more about the. I hate to use the word authenticity because it's such a buzzword, but the idea of like the true like connection with people, and that it's not AI generated and it's a real person. I think it's more a reaction to that, and those are just tactics that are a manifestation of it. So yeah, I think it's working. And then also to your point, I think it also there's an element of who's your buyer. And if you are upmarket and you are enterprise, and those like they're long sales cycles, they're high touch, they're experience led, and they're relationship driven, and those things like in person are really important.
The lifetime value that you get from customers is foundational data, right? As far as the cost to retain and grow someone's business versus finding new business is an old school sales metric from way back. But to be able to do that, you also need to have time in market. And if you're a young startup, and you've been live for a year or two, you just don't have that data yet. So it feels like it's just an optimization that's in constant motion in finding enough feedback to be able to do that. What are some of the things from a strategic standpoint that if you're early stage, say you're doing 1 million annual revenue as a business, what are some of the things that you would look at from a strategy point of view to help set up a framework to start quantifying investment and return?
Yeah, I think I mean, the maturity. It's almost like you're asking about maturity curve of like what to
Yeah,
prioritize
correct.
for early stage company. And I mean, it quite, regardless of what business type you are, meaning like non-recurring, recurring, et cetera. To me, when you're still in that phase, it really is all about new bookings, because to your point, retention, it's not that retention isn't important. It's just not the priority at that stage. And so I look a lot at, the top of funnel and then conversion metrics, because to me, that's a signal of, is there traction in the market? That do we have, product market fit, meaning we have a solution. Do the buyers see that there's a need for said solution? And that's where we put a lot of our investment. So this is like, if you think about like, we call the revenue performance model. So before they become a customer, on the left side or the right side. So if you're familiar with boarding by design, the idea of this bow tie, so left side, right side. So pre-customer activation, we're looking at all those signals around lead to customer to understand, what's happening from a volume and conversion perspective. Are they generating enough leads? And then are they converting from lead to what we call, an MQL, marketing qualified lead, to a SQL, sales qualified lead, and then from an SQL to close one. So it's really just setting up that foundation to understand, hey, what are those levers that we should be monitoring to determine if we have, product, in this example, product market fit.
Yeah, it's even understanding that from a simple level as a founder and how you're structuring that user journey, because a lot of the frameworks from a funnel perspective, they still exist, but they've changed dramatically. And one of the big changes that I've observed is the intersection of sales and marketing. Quite often they would live almost in parallel, but sometimes not even talk to each other, and would see their roles very different. And if anything, sometimes compete for the same budget because they felt that what they could do would be more impactful than their colleagues sitting on the desk adjacent to them. And the sales cycle now, it feels like that there's different stages that you need to hit people, and that needs to be strategically thought through between sales and marketing together.
Yeah, there's a lot of finger pointing, right? Of like, hey, it's a marketing problem or it's a sales problem. And I think that's one of the beauties of when you get the data set up properly. It's not a he said, she said. It's objective. So it's no longer a subjective thing. So that's one component of it. And then to where you're going is, what we're seeing is the depending on how like a founder wants to set up their go-to-market motion. But when we talk about go-to-market leader, we're just seeing a lot more coordination, whether it's like through accountability from a leadership perspective, or the way that they are setting up incentives to ensure that the sales and marketing teams are working effectively together. That's what we are seeing, is like, how do we move from finger pointing to the objective, hey, let's solve a problem, not have a team issue. And it could be a team issue, but oftentimes if we can create that feedback loop by having the objective measurement, we can understand a problem and solve said problem very quickly if you have the right team members in place.
And the way that each are incentivized as well can be quite different. I mean, in your textbook sales model, it can generally be a lower base and higher commission, and that changes motivation. And even though they're both fighting for the same team, and collective success is success individually, it still creates a divide. So the ability to quantify things and understand your data as far as touch points and moving through what you talked about with MQL and SQL and to close, and that linear journey, that tracking that and understanding that data, would you say that that is something that is important to try and set as a foundation in a business pretty early on? So, like, what are some of the key markers? Because when you're early stage and you're growth hacking, you're trying to find money any way that you can, any which way. It's a lot of active test and learn. Sometimes it's just like throwing things at a wall. Other times it can be more thought through. But what stage in the business should you start to put some benchmarks down as far as what you've observed on outreach and conversion, some of those numbers, so you can really understand what's working and what's not working?
Yeah, I think for founders, it's like, guys, don't over engineer things. Like, it's totally fine not to have a robust system on day one. Like, that would be a fool's errand, because ultimately adoption is what you want. And so how do you ensure, because adoption drives, if you have the right adoption, that means you have good data, and good data drives good reporting, so that you don't have the whole garbage in, garbage out. And so, from an early stage perspective, I think if you can have some of those foundational pieces, that's great. And what I mean by that is like pipeline stages. So like, hey, when we think about like from a whatever it is, like discovery call booked or meeting set to closed one, there's likely stages that a customer goes through in a journey to buy from you. And so if you can document that to understand that progression, what that will allow you over time to understand is, hey, where am I having leakage in the journey? Do I have because if they got to stage 0, what's going to tell you is if they're just dropping off, then you have the leads aren't good. Meaning they're not qualified for whatever reason. It could be they don't have budget. It could be they're not looking for the solution that you offer. There's a litany of reasons, but that's what allows you to see that visibility. And then when you get into like a stage, let's just call it stage 1, which could be like not a discovery call, but like a solution where you're demoing the product. It will help you understand, okay, do I not have product market fit for my solution? Like, why are my conversion rates so low? You may also be able to see from that, like, actually, our conversion rates are awesome. And then you go, okay, I really need to juice up my marketing spend and add more sales reps because we got fire here, and we need to go put the gas on the fire. So that's one thing I would just say is like sales stages is pretty an easy one to set up. And then I'd probably the other thing, if I'm very early, is I look at like life cycle stages at the contact level, because that will also help you on the lead side. So you'll understand, okay, where are my leads in the journey? And so that I know what to be reaching out to them and what message should I be creating. But I wouldn't go crazy on a lot of other stuff in the early phases. It just becomes noise, and your team, especially if it's a very small team, it's gonna become something that sits on a shelf that no one uses.
The last thing you want to do is have a system that takes so much time to manage that you're not in market and selling, because that early stage money
Yeah.
is everything.
Yeah. And then I know, like, look, to your point about being bootstrapped or not having a big budget, I mean, I'm sure there are other programs, but like HubSpot has HubSpot for startups, and it's like you can get access to these tools at a very affordable. I mean, when I say very affordable, I mean it's like up to 50% off on the software, and so they make ways to lower the bar or the barrier so that you can actually grow with these solutions, which I think is a pretty cool way that they've structured it.
And the tracking of that and not making it too cumbersome is important, but the life cycle part is interesting as well. And going back to the sales and marketing and the way that you generate customers, particularly say it's a SaaS business, and if it's a highly cluttered category and you can choose between 10 people, it's a lot of the time brand awareness and repetition. So
Yep.
from a sales perspective, if you're creating a lot of leads but you're not closing, the marketing team can also start to retarget, in simple terms, those folks with the right message that shows case studies or aspirational things you can do with the product. And the brand actually plays a really strong role in separating you from the pack. You can't just have repetition in the sense of trying to close. You also need to inspire people a little bit to differentiate yourself in market.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I was at a conference this morning, and it was with Webflow, which is like on the CMS side, so website. And this like gets in like on the marketer side, but it's like the disruption. We talk about disruption. And it's like, hey, SEO, everyone's like pursuing the blue link, which is Google, and now all of a sudden we got to look at AEO, answer engine optimization, and going to ChatGPT, and which is just like a whole different ballgame. We'll get into that later, but where I was going with this is the idea of what marketers creating content, they need to create content at different stages of the buyer journey to what you're describing. And it's like, hey, questions like, hey, what are CMS options in the market is a different question in a funnel versus what's the difference between or comparison between Webflow and WordPress. Like that's more middle, like I'm actually thinking about solutions versus, hey, like what should I be thinking for an implementation of Webflow? Those are all different content assets based off of different points in the buyer journey. So to your point about like inspiring action, the content being created must fit that life cycle stage. And if you don't have those stages set up, you're really just, you're blind throwing darts. And that's a really dangerous spot to be in because you can really break trust with the buyer.
Yeah, the contextual element of that, serving that right story at the right time, knowing what that person understands and how intentional they are with buying or spending at that point is critical. But the other side of that though too is what's happening now, and you could make a joke out of it, but it's almost real, where you're having an AI platform targeting and hitting a lot of people, but then those people getting hit so much that they have their own AI agent that's actually traffic managing inbound as well on their behalf, so they don't have to filter through it. So you have these two agents behind the scenes going at each other, trying to find ways through, and that
Yeah.
and it's a reality of what we're facing. So from a digital outreach, and you could almost go as far as say in 2026, cold outreach is going to die, and I've seen a lot of debate about it. But what you're seeing, what are some of the patterns that you've seen where the ability to find someone who is in your ICP is a good lead, you can find through automation a way to connect with that person where it doesn't feel like you're just more noise in the system? Like, where are you seeing that tension play out at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's there's a lot of, I would just like all the people that say things like prospecting is dead, SEO is dead. I mean, it's a lot of clickbait. I think to your point, right message, right time is really what it's about. And I think that there are ways that, like, how do you make the human the hero and leveraging AI to put that person in that position? Like AI, for example, I mean, if we have I'll use American football for you. But like, how do we put the human in the red zone? Meaning, like, hey, they are in, like, they are in the 20-yard line, touchdown. And so like AI can do that. Like it can put you, with the right buyer, the right time. Now you own the message. And so what we look at, things that I think are working, for these founders, this word intent has become a buzzword, but really all intent is they're doing something to indicate interest in your product or service. And ways that can get experienced is, you may have somebody go on your website, as an example. You can now de-anonymize that contact, and you can do outreach to said contact. You can see what page on your website they were on. So it's contextual, as we talked about earlier. That's a great way, if you do it right, to not like pitch slap somebody, but to know that they are looking at it. They could be on a G2 page for your product or service, and you could use that. There's ways to automate that to then, do outreach to the buyer. Paid campaigns is another one. They could be engaging with a paid campaign you have on LinkedIn that you're able to now do some interaction with. Those are more like ways that I think are really can be effective. There are other like ones that we've seen do really well, like on social, for example, where people are engaging or commenting on if you're active on LinkedIn. So if you're a founder, I would highly encourage you to have a personal brand on whatever platform that is for you. I mean, it could be Meta, could be Twitter or X, I should say, or LinkedIn, but pick your platform, have a point of view, and be active, because that will create a following, and that following you start to engage with, that will be automated in the background, but it will allow you to like show up as a human in that one-to-one interaction. So that's a lot, but just a few things that we're starting to see be effective. And I can even give you examples that we've used for Southbound, which is an event we're having a little bit later that I'm sure we'll touch on at the end of the show.
If you're building the future, you deserve a legal partner built for it. Morrison Foster, the legal edge behind the world's boldest innovators. They go by Mofo and are the team behind startups Decoded. For decades, Mofo has helped startups turn complexity into freedom. They combine deep market insight, tailored legal strategy, and a Mofo passion. Discover how Mofo can support you. Mofo.com.
The ability to build brand, and it comes up quite regularly in episodes now with me, is that personal brand is definitely a differentiator for early stage startups. When your company brand means nothing to a lot of people, then your own personal brand has depth and history to it. So you're able to tell stories of what you've observed, what you want to be able to solve, and articulate that in a way that has a human element to it. And it's the way that you show up in rooms, and it should be the same way you show up digitally now as well, where it actually has an element of personalization to their understanding who you are, because trust is king now. And with automation, where it's I use the example of programmatic ads, and we went from TV, radio, print into ads in websites to programmatic, just retargeting you everywhere you show up, where you feel like you couldn't escape them. Like when you get into that point, the effectiveness goes down the line as well. So trust is everything, because if you have trust and you have context, all of a sudden it's not spam, right? It
Yep.
allows you to actually have some form of interaction digitally or in person that allows you to get closer to closing that deal.
100% agree. Trust is the currency, and that's very fragile, and it can get broken very, very fast, and people can sniff that stuff out very, very quickly. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
But there's the other side of that too, which I want to explore a little bit, is around the friction tax, and it's something that's come up again as a pretty new term, as far as it kind of builds off that AI noise, right? As far as the tech stack you're using, how you automate, etc. And there's a term, the hubolution, which has also come to life. If everyone is using the same tools and the same tech stack to harvest ultimately the same people, then again, differentiating yourself is hard. So is your choice of tech stack as important as the strategy you use on that tool?
Yeah, this is a fun debate. I mean, when you said friction tax, I was thinking like historically, what we talk about friction tax is you can grow one of two ways. You just increase force or you reduce friction. But I think when you're in the idea of the friction tax in that example, like I think you can create a lot of debt. I think is where you're going. If you either And so, yeah, the idea been this proliferation of tools, and so hey, there are tens of thousands of tools now, and they just keep coming. And to your point, with the advent of AI and vibe coding and now agents, candidly, it's only going to get worse. And so, how do we think through a simplified approach that is I think not only easy to administer because there is an administration because these are tools that someone needs to own within you have a product owner almost. Think about it like you have your own software, but then think about your tools as software and someone needs to own that system. That's kind of what the RevOps function, one of the purposes of the RevOps function. But yeah, we would always say less is more. And so how do we think through fewer tools to drive adoption within the teams? Because like if you're a high growth organization, or if you're looking to be a high growth organization, like you're going to have turnover in your organization or just adding people, whether it's bringing people on or they move up or they move out. If you have, 20 plus tools in your stack, it's going to think about trying to drive 100% adoption with that. It's just going to get really, really hard and really, really messy. But we have a very let's say rigid. We have a toolbox that we say, hey, here's what we use. It's to serve, yes, it helps us in terms of how do we standardize our delivery, but it also serves the customer. And so we can talk a little bit more. I think the challenge you're seeing though is people going back to trust actually, is it used to be like I pick Salesforce or I pick HubSpot or whatever that is. Like I have my own tech ecosystem. And I just think that mindset has shifted, and it's very like the barrier to change is so low now. And so it's like how the trust is like, can you create recurring impact, recurring value for me, the customer? And if you can't, I'm no longer loyal to you and I will move. And that's a big shift. I mean, it used to be like getting off of Salesforce or getting off Dynamics or, getting off of HubSpot. It's like, that's a big, big, big initiative. It doesn't mean it's not still, but it's just people are more open to it because they need results. They need results fast.
And it is cluttered and it's also fragmented, and the breadth of your tech stack can become such a hot mess to manage. So consolidating that, I mean, that's going to happen by default anyway. In the next 2 years, there's going to be so much M&A activity, and where people just become the same company. It's the nature of the capitalist world that we live, but people will just disappear because they can't sustain revenue because it is so cluttered as well. And I had Adam Robinson on as a guest, who's got a company, RB2B, and he talked about in his category, he literally has had two businesses that have ripped him off 100%. Like his messaging, his website design, etc., selling the same thing. And when you have tools like Lovable to do that, like it's a really cluttered competitive market. So backing the right horse as far as your tech stack is also important, because if you're putting time from a RevOps perspective to manage it and then all of a sudden that disappears, like you're not back to scratch, but it can really hurt you and slow you down.
Yeah. And I think with Adam or just that example, I mean, I think the lesson there too is just in the advent of everyone can everyone can either steal or build very quickly, or they can answer the how. It's like what truly is a sustainable competitive advantage is really your story, your brand, but also like where I think you're going to is just like the product differentiation. But on the topic of like consolidation, yeah, I mean consolidation's happening. And if you look at the HubSpot piece, it used to be like a feature issue, like take the CRM versus Salesforce. Now it's just an education issue. Like everyone wants to be the platform that the go-to-market team uses. So like everyone's going there. And you've seen consolidation and to your earlier point, in a lot of different categories. And so there's that race to make sure that they can be that platform. It's a interesting time. It's a lot of fun to watch it, but it makes sense for the reasons you just described.
And I look at great example as Salesforce acquisition of Slack and Slack's latest release with agents across the board that are basically integrating across all of your files, history, sales documents, and automating that. It feels like Slack's becoming the new front end of Salesforce, and Salesforce will start to become not redundant, but it definitely won't live and breathe the way that it was, because it's so old as a legacy sales tool, and it just doesn't feel anywhere near as effective compared to like a Clay. And it's not to say it doesn't work, but you've just got legacy technology versus brand new technology going head to head.
Yeah, I think there's one of the broader narratives that we're seeing is this. I mean, typically when you think about like a CRM, it's there's this language like system of record, and what we're seeing is this shift from system of record to system of action, which gets from like a reactive to proactive motion. So how does it not just be a database, but how does it be a database that then informs the next action to take? And that example of like Slack overlay with agents is an example of, hey, like Salesforce is in the background, but Salesforce is that really where the data resides to inform what to do next. And I mean, I think that's what you're going to see with a lot of applications if they want to thrive in this, agent forward market that we're in now.
It's fascinating to watch that. Yeah, this year is going to be big on that activity where everyone's trying to work out how they retain their place as a market leader or continue to drive and eat market share out of the legacy competition.
Yeah, and I think anyone tells you that they know what's going to happen is lying. Candidly, I mean, it's so much. There's just a lot of unknowns. So like, and I think with what's going on in the market with all these applications, doesn't matter who you are, Salesforce, Monday, HubSpot, Figma. I mean, they're all getting hit hard right now. And I don't think it's, when I say hit hard, I mean like 50 to 70% of their market share. That's a lot of money gone in a very short period of time, and I don't think it's an indictment on because most of them, like, from if you look at their quarterly reports, is they're hitting their numbers. It's more of, like, the future is just really uncertain, and so it's more about, "Hey, you're being measured at 15x as opposed to x," and so we're just trying to figure out where the puck is going, and I don't think many people I would say 99% of the people or 99.9% of the people have no idea what that is, and that's okay, but it does feel uncomfortable as a result of that.
Because the categories are being completely redefined and there's new ones being built as well. So it's impossible to forecast because you don't and you can't. It's impossible to predict human behavior.
Yep.
And that's the test, right? You can forecast tech evolution, but how we utilize the tech and the way we do it, like in person versus digitally, there's so many things there that will play out. And the adoption of certain tech stack will also drive that as well. Like the survival of the fittest type mentality is very much where it is. It's like you may be forced to choose a certain path because it's the biggest market player and you just need to be on there. And that's the Salesforce legacy ultimately of what they have with such large enterprise clients. And the next generation, if you're a young founder, flipping it back to the start of our conversation, using Salesforce would feel very cumbersome and would feel so like out of touch with what you're trying to achieve. And in a world where you assume that automation and effectiveness is the default, it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's just a standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also like, I talk to like investors and they'll call it like the Salesforce tax, and I think that's changed a little bit. I do think it's important for founders as you're growing. It's like, hey, not just start with the end in mind, but like know what you're trying to build. And it's like if you really are trying to build when I say build, meaning hey, I want to make this a really large business. I'm going to have a really mature go-to-market team over time. I say start with the end, being like, okay, I know that's where I'm going. And so have a platform that can grow with you. And so I think oftentimes what we see is they'll start in pipe drive's fine. I don't have a lot of issues with pipe drive, but it's just not a platform. And so when you're trying to think through how do I, have my go-to-market team on one platform and I want to continue to grow with it, I just would caution folks to think about have that right perspective. Yes, you have to have a budget, and I totally get that. But just be careful when you're thinking through how do I invest in the right things.
Great call out. And to open this up a little bit, a part of the reason we're talking today is to talk about Southbound, which is happening in Atlanta at the amazing Roxy Theatre on April 16th. And that is going to be basically living, breathing day of what we're talking about now, but bringing in some experts. And you've got such a premium list of people. What were some of the things that you observed that made you realize that this is a conversation that needs to turn into a full event format?
Yeah, it's our third year doing it, to answer that first point. And I think, part of it goes back to what we were talking about there earlier, which is the idea of like trust. And it's like how do people experience your brand and how do you create value for the community that's not like transactional, but is also with the idea of like open hand of like, hey, how do we serve that go-to-market leader? Because that's ultimately like our mission statement. We engineer revenue outcomes for the go-to-market leader. And so how do we serve them, not just with our services, but also with education? And so that we figured, hey, there's no better way for us to do that than to have an event and to bring in speakers to equip them and enable them to thrive, not only survive, but thrive in this world. And that's just become more and more relevant over the last 3 years with what's been going on in the market. And so like the theme this year is all about time. It's this play on words. It's timeless and timely. And so what are those timeless principles that don't change, that go-to-market leaders need to be investing in for the growth of their team and their business? And then what are those timely practices that they should be incorporating? And so we talk about AI, for example, like going back to even that Webflow example of what is AEO and how do I do AEO effectively as a marketer? What is Clay? Like how do I do outbound prospecting at scale with this personalization intent triggers? And so we want to be able to kind of balance those two concepts and equip them with strategy and application in a one-day setting. And so that's the intent of the event.
So good. And if you think about some of the players as well, you've got HubSpot CEO Yamini Rangan, who is amazing as a leader. I love her thoughtfulness
Yeah.
in what she's doing for such a large organization. She seems very grounded, which is, I think, important in the world that we live today.
She's amazing. I mean, I was very fortunate to get to know her. We first met when she was the chief customer officer at HubSpot. And so we were growing within the HubSpot ecosystem pretty quickly. And she said, hey, I want to meet and just learn what you guys are doing differently. And I can remember that first meeting. I mean, very nervous. I mean, we were probably 5 months into the business. And I remember my first slide was so stupid, but it was like, we look different, we act different, we smell different. And it just was a really good meeting. And it was one of those ones where we built good rapport, and lo and behold, she becomes the CEO of HubSpot like 3 months after that, because Brian had been he had a skiing accident back, like this is probably 5 years ago, and she just assumed the role of CEO, and we kept a quarterly cadence. I think, what Yamini, one of the things I really respect and appreciate about her, yes, is her humility, but she makes herself available and she listens before she speaks. And she is constantly learning, whether it's through the partner community, whether it's through the customer community. There's just a lot to be said for that. And then I think what she deserves a ton of credit for is, um, like the AI push, and like everyone's of course done an AI push, but the way that they've approached it, where it's like platform centric versus point solution. We're not going to charge for it. Like we're going to figure out, hey, what does a customer want? What are they liking? And then we can monetize it over time. And so I just think that the way that they've gone about it has been really smart. And they're starting to see those early signals of success that are going to position them well for HubSpot going forward.
And it's nice to hear that. And that's my impression of her as far as what you just described. It seems to be like she presents the same as she is in person, which is, I always respect that in a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who else are you excited about?
Varun from Clay, of course.
Yeah.
Like for me, I think it was hard to use, but that's to be expected at the start because it was doing very complex work in understanding your business, your message, your audience, and trying to streamline that. If you look at a business like Zapier, which is basically finding a way to piecemeal a bunch of products side by side that work, Clay was a way to through line that in one platform. So I'm fascinated to hear from Varun on where they're at currently, but also more around how they see the future. They're obviously on the bleeding edge of effectiveness from a go-to-market perspective and how they stay contemporary in a world that changes so rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, they've been on just quite a ride, right? And like, if you go back to what we talked about earlier of brand, I mean, I think Varun's done a great job of leveraging a personal brand to grow a professional brand, because people trust people, not brands. I mean, that's going back to like that. There's like what happened in B2C is happening in B2B. And so that personal brand becomes really important. And I think Varun does a really good job of like being true to who he is. And it resonates with people. Yeah, Clay, to your point, is a super powerful tool. It's like that blank canvas concept of like what you can do with it. So there's a lot of power, but you also need to know what the heck you're doing. And so it takes somebody that's more technical. Like if you put SDR in there, I mean, feel free to put SDR in there, but they better be, they better know what they're doing. But yeah, I think he'll be great. And we're going to have Sangram Vajri doing that Q&A. And so Sangram was one of the co-founders of Terminus in Atlanta, and then he runs Go-to-Market Partners now. And so I think it'll be a really, really good conversation between the two of them.
Amazing. And it's a one-day event in Atlanta, as I mentioned, April 16th. I am, as part of Startups Decoded, on ground, a media partner for the event, which I'm super excited about. And on the day, I'm going to get the little side chats. So talking to some of the speakers, finding out about what they talked about on stage, but then what happens next. And it's one of the great things about events that I love is one, connecting with colleagues and sometimes competitors even as well, and understanding where they're at and challenges they're facing, but also as far as like almost passing the baton on in the sense of what happens there in conversation. How do you package that up and let people share that knowledge, which is part of what we're working on and collaborating together. As far as the format, we've covered a couple of the speakers. Like, how does the big picture, how does the day flow? What could people expect?
Yeah, I think, people, I would say like the idea of like come for the speaker, stay for the community type of kind of, that would be the way to think about it. And so to your point, we have some, I think some really exciting speakers. I think what makes this a really unique event that we hear a lot about is like the experience that we create. And so it's going to be it's going to be educational, yes, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And there's going to be opportunities for people to interact with one another. And so we just found that to be a recipe for success where if it's just a stale, constant speaker drip, no matter who the speakers are, it's not going to land as well. And so how you make people feel is just as important. And so we're trying to create that like Southern hospitality, if you will, where people just walk away saying that was like, I felt like a guest. I didn't feel like I was an attendee. If we do that, then we're successful. Fortunately, we've done it the last 2 years, and this is bigger, so it's a bit of a challenge, but we're excited about creating that experience for our guests.
And the curation element of connecting people is critical. Like listening and consuming, you can get information from folks, but the ability to feel like it's been curated in a way that is intentional for what you're trying to understand, where you're going next, what you're facing, it sort of feels like there's someone is speaking to you personally. And that's the sign for me of a good event, and walking away with that knowledge plus new folks that you've met as well. For me, this is my first time to Atlanta as well. So looking forward to some of that Southern hospitality. I've been asking friends for some hot tips on places to eat, and I love local food. And so I won't chew your time up on the podcast for this, but I definitely need some hot spots.
Well, it's like the perfect, like, Atlanta does get really hot, but it's like April, so it's like the perfect time of year. The Masters is the week before, the weekend before. It's like the best time to be in Atlanta from a weather perspective. Yeah, barbecue, fried chicken, like we got Southern food's great. I can definitely give you guys some recommendations. But I think, yeah, going back to like the point about like that it was designed for you, like that's how you should experience it. And just to give you, like I had a call with a speaker yesterday, and he's like, "Hey, what's on the mind of the buyer? I want to do just a canned presentation." And so just even hearing, his name's John Acuff, and he'll be talking about the mindset shift that we talk about, like this old playbook, new playbook, like how do you change your mindset to succeed in this world. It was just cool to hear like that's the perspective he's taking. Or for Yamini, like, hey, I want to hear questions from the crowd, so can we get some like what's on their mind that I can speak to. Varun with the same thing, like, hey, can we bring somebody up to talk about like a question they have. Or Don Miller, who talks about story brand and sound bites, like, can I do a live example with one of the guests, like how can they create a sound bite for their company. Like, those are just moments that are really powerful, but are just more signals of, hey, this has been to serve that guest, as opposed to a platform for these speakers just to make their name known.
No one wants to hear a press release read out, right? It
Yeah.
needs to be immersive, and that interactivity is perfect. And someone like Donald Miller, as you called out, like that, the ability to see someone who's so talented at their craft turn something around so quickly, like in person, is always going to be impressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Brendan. Is there anything else we should know about the event? Tickets? Like, can I put you on the spot and say that we can give my people some kind of special deal? Because I like the hookups.
I would love to hook you and your community up. So we would love to have your community be a part of it. The one thing we didn't talk about that I think is actually a fun close is we're gonna have a mentalist slash magician in the show before a happy hour. And I experienced him at Clay as a sculpt their event, and he was the closer, and I was like, if I can get him, that will be like the best thing ever. Because I walked in as a skeptic to that guy's performance, and I was I was in the front row, not by design. I just ended up being in the front row, and I was part of his magic. So I can tell you it is legitimate. And I'm excited to see him wow our customers, or excuse me, our guests at the event, because that'd be a fun close. So I would love for your community to be a part of it. There will be a discount code that your team can use to promote this, and we'd love to have them there on April 16th.
Well, I call it mate traits where I'm from in Australia, and I always love it. I love the hookups. But yeah, the magician part, I didn't catch that one actually on the list. So they're always fun, but I definitely won't be in the front row. I'm not sure I want to be the one that is up on stage.
Yeah, it's legit, man. It's wild. So I may have to tell them to find you in the audience.
Spot too. The bald guy with the glasses and the moustache. Nice. All right. I know we're at time. We'll be down there. Excited to be a part of it. And yeah, again, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Startups Decoded. If today's conversation helped you think differently, share it with a founder in your network. And don't forget to subscribe for real-world startup insights every week. We really value your support. If you're interested in partnering with us, email hello@startupsdecoded.com. I'm Andy Walsh. I'll see you next week.